Scene Appreciation Day, RWBY edition. So I needed to talk about an extremely important scene and I didn't want to wait until like 2 hours into my Volume 3 review to do it. So I sort of glossed over this in my Volume 1 review because I thought it was way too literal and straightforward for anyone to misinterpret. But you know there must be a problem when I, of all people, am forced to step in and actually defend the way RWBY is written. The scene is from episode 16 of Volume 1 if you want to follow along.
In the ashes of war, the white fang was meant to be a symbol of peace and unity between humans and the faunus.
Now, the ashes of war is an interesting phrase because it means that these poor humans didn't even have time to sweep up before the White Fang politely asked for equality. Based on the information that it is the faunus who are giving the humans terms to accept, and that in Volume 1 it was revealed that the turning point in the war came when the faunus won a battle,
General Lagoon made the mistake of trying to ambush the faunus in their sleep. The general was captured.
It's feasible to assume that the faunus won this war, and proved through their actions that they were really seeking equality. I mean, if they won the war, they could have easily turned the tables and become the oppressors. Alternately, there is an extremely high likelihood that there's critical information the audience hasn't been informed of, and that the faunus actually lost the war. However, it is plainly stated that the faunus were promised equality, but were met with oppression.
Despite being promised equality, the faunus were subjected to discrimination and hate.
So there's already been a war, and a promise of equality on which the humans already reneged. Now, usually violating the terms of a peace treaty is justification for relaunching an all-out war. Treaty of Versailles, anyone? But even when justified, the White Fang still met injustice with peaceful protests for many, many years. Now, we have no idea exactly how long, but there is limited information to go on. The war started within the last 80 years.
On this day, nearly 80 years ago, the largest war in recorded history came to an end.
Remember, this speech is not in reference to the Faunus Rights Rebellion.
It was a war of ignorance, of greed, and of oppression.
What did you say, nigga?
Yeah. That war was about oppression, not the war that was fought more recently, where the literal goal was to end the oppression of an entire race. Do you not see that the dialogue is clearly, consistently, and deliberately depicting systemic racism against the faunus? Now back to trying to determine when this rebellion happened. The Faunus War lasted at least 3 years.
What many theorists believe to be the turning point in the third year of the war.
Oobleck referred to the Faunus Wars as ancient history.
While this must feel like ancient history to many of you, it is imperative to remember that these are relatively recent events.
So there couldn't have been too long of a gap in between the end of the Great War and the start of the Faunus War. But even so, using terms that imply that a currently ongoing struggle is no longer in existence is reason enough to have every human in Vale exterminated.
5 years ago, our leader stepped down.
And the White Fang stopped peacefully protesting 5 years ago. So, the White Fang met the violation of a peace treaty with a potential 70 years of peaceful protesting before retaliation. I mean, shit, Plessy versus Ferguson got overturned in less time than that. The entire Indian independence movement lasted less time than that. Historically, peaceful civil rights movements take significant strides much faster than they are depicted in this show. The White Fang had justification for reigniting a full-scale war for like 70 years, but held back in favor of peaceful protesting, which makes them far more sympathetic than the humans who lied to them about a promise of equality.
We were setting fire to shops that refused to serve us, hijacking cargo from companies that used faunus labor.
As a cherry on top of this injustice Sunday, 5 years of guerrilla-style attacks against racist corporations led to capitulation.
And the worst part was, it was working.
That means there was nothing stopping them from treating the faunus equally besides their own racism. Okay, let me explain that. Peaceful protesting is an appeal to human decency.
Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help, help, I'm being repressed!
It's done to put pressure on the oppressors by making them look bad to the general public.
That's what I'm on about. Did you see him repressing me? You saw it, didn't you?
So either the human government doesn't care what the general public thinks and only caters to businesses, which most likely wouldn't be true, otherwise how did they stay in power for so long?
We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen.
Granted that the council has to represent the needs of the people.
The governing council to represent the people and their needs.
Or the far more likely answer, the human people that the government was representing don't care about the faunus. The fact that there's anyone who watched this scene and doesn't know that the White Fang are in the right is pretty crazy. Well, even before this scene,
Controversial labor forces.
being against an organization that opposes slavery is a little, off. But in the most recent episode, this point is reiterated by Adam saying this.
I wanted equality. I wanted peace.
What you want is impossible!
And there are people who not only think the White Fang is wrong, but think they're worse off now. Oh, for fuck's sake. I mean, the main thrust of Volume 2 is that an entire warehouse full of young people are willing to give their lives for a plan that might overthrow the government that's oppressing them.
The people that hired me are going to change the world!
Torchwick is on the right side of history because of survivalism, and RWBY is on the wrong side of history because of misplaced optimism. Now, if only they could have told that story in like an hour and a half instead of, like, 7.